Ambassador Sarah Chen adjusted her simple black suit as she walked through the crystalline corridors of the Galactic Council station. The other delegates stared, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed disdain. Her modest attire stood in stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial robes, bioluminescent displays, and technological augmentations worn by representatives of the galaxy's more advanced civilizations. The Zephyrian delegate's scales shimmered with built-in holographic projectors displaying his species' achievements. The Corvani ambassador floated in a gravity nullification field, her crystalline body refracting light into mesmerizing patterns. Even the insectoid Thakari wore ceremonial armor that hummed with energy signatures. Sarah carried only a simple briefcase. "The human arrives," sneered Coordinator Veltar, the hegemony's chief representative, his 4 eyes fixed on Sarah with undisguised contempt. "Tell me, Primitive, did your species finally invent faster-than-light communication? Or are you still using those quaint electromagnetic signals?" Polite laughter rippled through the assembly chamber. Sarah smiled and took her assigned seat, deliberately placed in the back corner, as far from the central podium as possible. "We're still working on it," she replied cheerfully, setting her briefcase on the floor. The session began with the usual pageantry. Each major civilization presented their latest achievements. The Zephyrians had developed nanoconstructors capable of building entire cities in hours. The Corvani had created sentient crystals that could process information at near-light speed. The Thakari displayed their new bioweapons that could adapt to any planetary environment. And now, Coordinator Veltar announced with theatrical ceremony, "We come to the newer members of our community." His pause drew more snickers. "The human delegation will present their species' contribution to galactic civilization." Sarah stood and walked to the central platform, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet chamber. She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a small, unremarkable device about the size of a smartphone. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly without amplification, "humanity is grateful for this opportunity to share our latest development." The Corvani delegate's crystalline form chimed with amusement. "Is that a primitive computing device? How quaint." "Actually," Sarah said, holding up the device, "this is something we call a universal translator." A few delegates shifted uncomfortably. Translation technology wasn't particularly impressive. Most species had developed it millennia ago. "Our version is a bit different," Sarah continued. "It doesn't just translate languages." She pressed a button on the device. "It translates thoughts." The chamber fell silent. "For instance," Sarah turned to face the Zephyrian delegate, "you're currently thinking that this is impossible because thought translation requires quantum entanglement of neural pathways, which would necessitate invasive cybernetic implants." The Zephyrian's scales stopped shimmering. He hadn't spoken those words aloud. Sarah rotated to face the Corvani representative. "And you're wondering how we achieved crystalline matrix synchronization without centuries of harmonic tuning research." The crystalline being's form went completely still. "You see," Sarah explained to the increasingly agitated assembly, "while you were all focused on advancing your existing technologies, humans took a different approach. We studied the one thing all your species have in common." "Which is?" Coordinator Veltar demanded, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Arrogance." The word hung in the air like a physical presence. "Every species here developed the same fundamental assumption, that intelligence follows predictable patterns. That advancement means making things bigger, faster, more complex." Sarah pocketed the device. "Humans learn to think smaller." She reached into her briefcase again, this time withdrawing what appeared to be a simple seed. "This contains the DNA blueprint for every extinct species in the galaxy," she announced. "Our xenobiologists have been quietly collecting genetic samples from ancient ruins, fossil records, and environmental traces. We can resurrect any species that has ever existed." The seed seemed to pulse with inner light. The Zephyrians' original homeworld, before they stripped it for resources? We can restore it. The Corvani crystal gardens destroyed in their civil wars? We have the harmonic frequencies. The Thakari's symbiotic partners, lost to genetic experimentation. They're in here. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber, but Sarah wasn't finished. And this, she said, producing a final item, a simple glass sphere filled with swirling mist, is a pocket dimension. We figured out how to fold space-time into portable containers. Each one can hold approximately the volume of a small moon. The silence was deafening. You see, honored delegates, while you were competing to prove your superiority, humans were learning to preserve, restore, and protect. We don't build bigger weapons. We make healing fields. We don't create faster ships. We make distances irrelevant. We don't conquer planets. We make new ones. Coordinator Veltar's voice was barely a whisper. This is impossible. No, Sarah replied, smiling as she packed her items away. This is human. She closed her briefcase and turned to leave. Oh, and one more thing. That thought translator, it works both ways. We've been listening to your deliberations for months. We know about the planned invasion of our solar system. The chamber erupted in chaos, but Sarah's voice cut through the noise. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to cancel that invasion. You're going to officially recognize Earth as a sovereign world. And in return, we're going to pretend we didn't hear you planning genocide. She paused at the chamber's exit. But if you do decide to proceed with your original plan, you should know. We've already made copies of your home systems. All of them. Pocket dimensions are very convenient for preserving things we might want to put back later. Sarah walked out, leaving behind a room full of the galaxy's most powerful beings, sitting in stunned silence, finally understanding that the species they'd tried to humiliate had just checkmate them without firing a single shot. The human had smiled all the way to the door.